But we could do it even better for a real good embedded finance solution. That would be that we should issue the card not to our customer directly, but directly into the car. Because why should we give a card to the customer who can then some way put it? So there are a lot of these things, but it takes time to prepare. We need also standards, so it's not just each bank doing these things by themselves, because then nothing will work.
Yeah.
But there are so many opportunities.
Kasper, thank you so much for taking time to come in and speaking to us.
Yeah, well, I'm happy to do so. I think that what I've seen you also organizing the Nordic FinTech Week, etc. It's amazing what you've done so far. So of course, I want to come here today.
Thank you. That's very kind of you. Just before we start, for those that have not had the pleasure of meeting you, please tell us briefly who you are and what you do.
Yeah, okay, thank you. My name is Kasper Sylvest. I'm currently Executive Director in Danske Bank, heading a unit called Payment Sector Collaboration, which is basically the unit that handles industry engagement in Danske Bank with the focus on payments and related services. Part of that job is then to do the industry work, and my favorite part of that is to be part of the Mobey Forum Association, where I was elected chair earlier this year. I've personally been member of, or been going to the Mobey Forum events for more than 10 years, and been on the board of directors for 10 years, but now I'm also the chair.
Okay, can you briefly just tell us what Mobey Forum is and what's the purpose?
Mobey Forum is an organization that is it was created in the year 2000, so it's actually a pretty old organization in these times. It was back then when there were, one person in each of the big organizations who thought this mobile, there's probably something to it, But they were like these one-man army in each organization. But then these people, 10, 12 people came together, and that was like Microsoft, IBM, Deutsche Bank, HSBC, and the UPS and the likes, and they created Mobey Forum. It has since grown to become a big association. We are currently more than 50 members. We are what we call a bank-led organization, meaning that the board of directors have to have a majority of banks, because we still think that banks are driving a lot of the directions within the mobile financial service area, which is our focus area. Then we try to connect a lot of our members, being the place to go for let's say practitioners. So it's not necessarily the C-level people coming to our events. It's more people who like to get their hands dirty, who are sitting and struggling with actual problems.
Right.
And then they can meet with peers from all over the world and discuss these things in confidential, but of course still with respect to competition rules and all that. But we create this very, very transparent network of specialists within different areas. It depends a little bit on what the members want. Still, the mobile financial service is sort of the core into it. So it's digital wallets, it's open banking, it's digital ID, it's embedded finance, you name it. And we have probably been looking into it, creating white papers, webinars, etc., for the good of the community, but also a wider industry.
Right, and with all this cross-pollination and collaboration with other peers in industry, you must have your finger on the pulse of what's trending.
Well, I try at least, but there are just so many things happening now. Personally, I've been working in the industry for more than 20 years, and it gets more and more busy every day, I would say. There's been a lot of, first of all, the technology have matured a lot, so now you can do a lot of fantastic things you couldn't do 10 years ago. There are also a lot of deregulation and other types of regulation that sort of pushes the development and innovation in certain areas. So, and especially in the competitive area, there are so many others than back when I started, it was just the banks. Now there are all the others. So there's so many things popping up all the time. But I would say there's, of course, a big fuss about the AI. But then again, AI is so many different things. It's like you could just also say the internet, more or less.
Right.
So there's so many things. There's the AI in terms of customer-facing experiences, but it's also about improving productivity internally in your organization and a lot of other things. But then we also have things like open banking. It's still a thing. It's a theme that has sort of progressed slowly. and now moving into the more what you can call open finance area, where it's not just about payments, but it's about all your financial data that we need to start sharing with each other. So that's also a very, very big one. And then, of course, all the digital assets, central bank digital currencies, cryptocurrencies, etc. That's, of course, also a very, very hot topic, and I could continue
right.
there are just so many things that are happening at the same point in time.
And presumably Mobey Forum's priorities align with the trends that you're seeing?
Yeah, we definitely try as much as possible. So, for instance, when members want to focus on a specific topic, we usually create a working group around it that then deep dives into a topic and try to share knowledge with the rest of the community. So right now we are working with embedded finance, which is something that's quite relevant because, again, we still also try not to look 5-10 years ahead, because that's not so actionable for us. I mean, our members are typically people who are looking at implementing something within the next 2 or 3 years. So we have to keep, let's say, not the long sides, but the short to medium side. So embedded finance, open banking is still a very hot topic, and then of course also digital ID. And we are very soon also looking into doing a lot more with an AI. Right. We also have a CBDC group, which is more like an AA group for CBDC people, if you can put it that way, because for many it's still such a weird concept. There's so many who have difficulty understanding what it is and why we need it. Personally, I'm still struggling a little bit with it. So we just created this sort of little informal group where people can show up and say and ask these questions. And there we have also some of the. We had a meeting the other day where even a representative from the European Central Bank showed up. We invited him to share his thoughts because they're driving the digital euro. So a lot of topics.
Right, really interesting. I'd love to zoom in on some of these topics. So to start with, we know that open banking came as a result of PSD2, and at least at the very beginning there was a little bit of resistance from banks to open up their systems and their data.
Oh, yes.
Now that we're a few years into the open banking revolution, how are banks dealing and approaching the whole idea?
I would say the mindset have definitely changed. I mean, because I also recall the discussions back before PSD2, there was this concept of access to account, as it was called, that was in 2010, 2011-ish. There was these thoughts. And then when PSD2 came, there was still a lot of reluctance, like how do we make this as difficult as possible? That's at least some of the thoughts I heard here and there. But we at least in where I work, we try to embrace it because we know it's coming. So why not embrace it? Do it in the best way. And it looks like now, at least in the payment space, which is what open banking is primarily about so far. Everyone in the industry are using it in some way or other. I mean, it's like a product. You need to have account aggregation, account information services as part of your standard package. Otherwise, you can't really. I mean, everyone expects you to have that service. Yeah. So everyone in that way is embracing it, and that's not just for personal customers, but also for corporates. But still, we haven't seen a lot of takeoff on the payment initiation space yet. Right. But it's probably coming. It just takes a lot longer than expected. And interesting enough, PSD2 regulated 3 open banking services: the account information service, the payment initiation service, and the funds availability service. The last one is not mentioned in the successor of PSD2. We are getting now PSD3 and also something called payment service regulation. It's not mentioned. It's only the other 2 services that are, because no one picked it up. And I think that's also good that the legislators are actually looking into what is happening in the market and say, okay, no one is using this, then let's not regulate that anymore. But the interesting stuff is that now we are moving way beyond payments. There's this new digital, the FIDA is called, from the European Commission, Financial Information Digital Act, which is about sharing all other data than payment data, because that's already been regulated. So now it's about your savings account, your loan account, credit accounts, but a lot more also, because it's not just for the banks and PSPs, it's also insurance and pension companies, investment companies. So it's the entire industry. And that's quite interesting because I recently overheard a discussion among some people in the insurance industry, and they were like, where the banks were 5-6 years ago, like, oh, sharing. It's good to share on a voluntary basis, but otherwise not.
Right.
But I think it's still going to be very successful because the Commission have, of course, learned a lot about the failures of PSD2, where each bank were to define their own APIs, so making it virtually impossible for a startup to connect to 2,000 banks during the weekend. I mean, because you have to make 2,000 integrations, not just one. So it's going to be easier. And then also in terms of the financial part of it, because in the space of the open finance, the ones that share data are actually allowed to get some compensation for that, which is, I would say, only fair because it does cost money to create APIs and run them, etc. Still not allowed to charge for data regulated in PSD2, PSD3, so that will still be for free. But the other part, we're allowed to get some sort of compensation. How that should work, we don't know that yet, but there's supposed to be some scheme to do it, to regulate it. But interesting enough, then the third party who uses the data and then are to pay, let's say, us for getting the data, they're not allowed to pass on the fees to the end user. So I'm not really sure how they're going to make money on this because, I mean, still the regulation is still in the very early stages, so a lot of things can change. But there's been requests that it should happen in real time, the sharing of data. So, but that also means things are going to be really, really expensive to build.
I bet.
And that means the front bill for the first couple of fintechs connecting, they cannot pay for it, and then nothing will happen. So let's wait and see.
All right,
Sorry,
very interesting.
I'm talking quite a lot, I know, but yeah.
No, that's great, and that's why we have you here. So, all right, I'm also very keen to get your take on embedded finance.
Yeah.
We've heard that there's a 7 trillion opportunity on the back of embedded finance, that it basically just will extend the reach that financial products and services will have. But at the same time, we've also heard from some banks the fact that they're a bit worried about losing that customer interface. How are banks dealing with this conundrum?
It's a little bit funny because it's a little bit the same discussion there was before we got PSD2, where also this fear that, if you have account information service or payment initiation, then we will lose the customer interface to whoever builds the best app, more or less. That hasn't happened, not yet. So I'm not so concerned about the business part of it, but of course the value chain is different than the traditional one. There will be more players in the value chain, and I think each player will maybe try to take a bigger role than what they have today. So there will be a little bit of fighting, but it's also about the strategy you decide. So if you are a bank like the one I work for, one play could be to ensure that our payment instruments are easy to embed by someone else. That means we are not being cut out of the transaction or anything, because that's still what we will be doing, and that's what we are very good at doing. But of course, it could also drive the number of transactions, because if being put out and improve the customer journey for other people in the non-financial use case, you could put it that way, then it's just good for us. So I don't see it as a threat as such, but the value chain is different, and that's just something we have to accept, that the things are changing. But I also agree that it is a huge business, but there are also so many opportunities where there are a lot of things we could do much better going forward. I mean, look at electrical vehicles. I mean, they need to charge and they need to pay for it. I know that the Commission are coming with a directive that sort of enforces all the charging stations in Europe to be able to accept a payment card, which is good, because that's not the case today, and you might get stuck somewhere because you don't have the right subscription to the right charging station.
Right. Yeah.
But we could do it even better for a real good embedded finance solution. That would be that we should issue the card not to our customer directly, but directly into the car. Because why should we give a card to the customer who can then some way put it? I mean, so there are a lot of these things, but it takes time to prepare. We need also standards, so it's not just each bank doing these things by themselves, because then nothing will work. But there are so many opportunities. Right. So I'm quite excited about that.
It does sound like a very exciting future to look forward to. We talked a little bit about at the beginning about wallets and about digital ID.
Yes.
And we recently heard that it's been approved at a European level, this regulation that every single member state needs to have some sort of EID.
Yes.
What's going to be the impact to banks on the back of that?
That's going to be quite interesting because it depends a lot on how that wallet actually will look like, because a wallet just with an EID in itself is not that interesting, you say. So of course it will have to have other functionality, like maybe payments. And this is where we as a bank then need to be embedded in that wallet. So it's our payment instruments that's being used. Because there's this, let's say, risk that you actually create a wallet that will more or less take over the dialogue with the customer in most cases, because if you have your ID there, you have some sort of payment functionality, you might have your social security card, your driver's license, etc. Then you have a tool for maybe 90% of your normal interactions, which means you'll probably never really use your banking applications anymore, unless you really need to do something with your loans or something like that. And that means suddenly we'll lose a lot of the exposure. So there is a risk there that it's different than the embedded finance, because embedded finance specific use cases. But here, I think that a lot of customers are not that special. Of course, all customers want to feel special, but they have very much the same needs. They just need to have a payment card and be able to pay, and also to see their account balance, and then of course to have their ID there so they can verify who they are when they make a payment or whatever else they're doing. So I think that could be kind of a game changer in some way in terms of customer experience, at least. But it's still interesting to see how many options there will be for, let's say, private actors to be part of these wallets and the design of them. I mean, I think some governments may choose to make their own a government wallet, you could say, while others say, well, it's up to the market. Here are some bits and pieces. You can design the front end yourself or something like that. So that's something we're still waiting for to see what are the options there.
Okay, and maybe just for people like myself who are a layman in what's happening, let's say today in Denmark, if I want to pay something with my credit card online, I enter the details, and then I have to go to MitID to authenticate myself. How will an European ID scheme vary from that?
It doesn't really, because it's about interoperability. So it's still up to each country to have that MitID, or in Sweden we have Bank ID, and in Finland they have the FTN network. So that's still national, but they should be interoperable, so they would work everywhere. That was actually, I mean, the regulation you are referring to, that's number 2. There's also a number 1 that basically wanted to do the same thing, that there should be these national IDs that should be possible to use when interacting with these government agencies in the rest of Europe. That never really happened. I mean, in Denmark, we recently got MitID. Before that, we had NemID that was there for 10 years. And just a couple of years ago, it was possible to use NemID one place out of Denmark. And that was at the university in the Netherlands. That was sort of the only one, even though there was this regulation saying, if you're doing this, then it should be sure that it can be used, but it was on a voluntary basis. So no one is doing it, because how often do you actually need to use your digital ID when you go to the library in the Netherlands or whatever? I mean, probably not very often. But now it's going to become mandatory. Again, it's a part of this huge digitalization agenda the European Commission are driving in order to speed up development and foster innovation. So everyone will have each country will have their own national digital ID, and then the idea is you should be able to use it when you interact with the authorities in Spain or wherever you are in Europe, even though it's a Danish one, for instance.
Right. Okay, well, that's quite a significant move, especially for maybe some countries that are not so used to having the digital ID.
Yes, and this is also why it will take a lot of time, even though, I mean, we have seen before Commission comes with a plan and say it has to be done by this date. But, things just take a lot of time. Because it's also about the trust. I mean, in the Nordics, people generally trust the government and trust whatever they are telling us to do. So, of course, there's also big trust in the digital IDs we have in the Nordics, also because we're quite used to them now. But in other markets in Europe where they are not that digitalized, there's also maybe a bigger distance between the citizens and the government, also in terms of trust. So,
Yes.
so that's also why, if I got a digital ID, do I actually trust it, and why should I actually use it? And then you get into all the Big Brother stuff. You know,
privacy,
people track my movements, etc. You know, but I mean, if you are carrying your phone, you are being tracked. So,
yes, true.
so what's the difference?
And also mentioning in relation to CBDCs, you see this as being something that the potential digital euro would be linked to?
Yes, I mean, I think it would be quite natural when you have your digital ID, you have you also embed the digital euro in there as a payment instrument, just as you will have maybe stored your credit cards there as well, so you will have a suite of payment instruments in that wallet. And yes, but let's wait and see what will happen with the digital euro. I mean, it's still... the ECB have recently announced a new phase in their project, but they still need to have the legal base, because they're not allowed to issue a digital euro today.
Right.
So they need to have the legal base in place, and that takes a lot of time. I mean, we saw the draft regulation this summer, but it's still a draft, and takes time for the Commission and the Parliament to agree on all of these things. And it could still take a lot of time before they actually enter into some sort of agreement, and then that's just the legal base. Then it's up to the ECB to actually deliver. So I think we are still 3 or 4, maybe 5 years before we'll have the digital euro.
Okay. All right. Now, we've been talking about some of the trends that we're seeing in the market. Which one is the one that excites you the most?
There are there are many. I mean, because for instance, AI is a big buzz right now, and I'm also quite excited because I can see there are so many possibilities to do stuff to help a lot of people, giving them better customer experiences, but also help colleagues, etc., get a better way of working. And we can make fantastic products. But I also see a little bit of struggle and some problems there, because there are also the ethical part of data, and I think that we'll soon see larger financial institutions start hiring data ethical officers.
Okay.
So there should be some sort of ethics, because yes, data is extremely powerful, and we can do a lot of things with it, but you also have to find the right balance. But I'm truly excited about AI, but also because there are just so many directions it can go into. But there's also another one that I'm excited about, and this might sound quite boring, and it's not really a focus at the Mobey currently, because it is really boring. But it's about standardization.
Okay.
Because we are trying to create, a single payment area in Europe, and the way of doing that is by standardizing things, moving things to using XML when communicating with others, following the same ISO standards. Yes, I know that is boring, but on the other hand, that sort of creates a fundament for us to create new products and also have less maintenance in everything we do, instead of having a lot of proprietary solutions like specific Danish payment formats and Swedish ones, etc. The same standard across that, where only the currency code is different, because that will then give us a lot more time and resources that have been freed up from doing this boring maintenance to do all the fun stuff. So that's something I'm really excited about, even though it's not something we as such discuss at Mobey, because standardization is a little bit boring. But
But it has to be there eventually.
It has to be there, but it just also takes time, because whenever you do some of these changes without any apparent benefit for the end customer, it just takes a little bit longer, because the benefit? Well, it's not really there yet, but in 5 years' time, I'll tell you.
Yeah. All right, Kasper. Just before we close, tell us a little bit more about Mobey Forum. Why should banks consider being members? What's the benefit for them?
Yeah, but first of all, it's not just for banks. I mean, we also have other PSPs and also vendors, but it is a community of sharing information and experiences with each other. We have these 4 member meetings every year that is hosted by one of our members, and it's not something fancy. I mean, we've been in things that have formerly been churches and stuff like that, so it's not like we are running around 5-star hotels or anything like that. But it's a place of getting people together, having Chatham house rules enforced, meaning also the transparency and the openness is much better than what you experience at maybe a commercial conference. And then another thing is also there are no sales pitches. They're not allowed there. But we still have the majority of our members are vendors.
Okay.
But they are not allowed to make sales pitches there. But so it's quite liberating to to be in a place like that where you don't have to run away from all the sales agents. But you can actually have an honest conversation with them and say, well, what I really need is this and this and this. Your product is, you can have that conversation without having any sort of fear that you need to committing to anything. Or then they can always call you a few weeks later and say, hey, I thought about that. I have an idea.
Okay.
And so, but otherwise, it is really about the network, and it's about coming attending each member meeting, because you get people who actually becomes kind of your friends in the end, because you start building this trust. You see them 4 times every year, and suddenly they are people you can reach out to also, not at the member meetings, but between the member meetings, to say, hey, I know you're a bank, I'm a bank, but you operate in Switzerland, I'm not operating in Switzerland, so we can probably talk about some of these experiences. How do you do about that? That really helps a lot. So you get a lot of this content you cannot Google, if you can put it in that way. And I would also say, as a business case, it's good. I mean, we have associate memberships, which is €6,000 per year. Banks pays a little bit more, and you also have some premium. But for those €6,000, you get access to everything. The 4 events, which is 1.5, 2-day events every time, but you don't pay for attending them specifically. So because you already paid the membership, and you can, in theory, send a number of people every time. So if you look at that compared to, let's say, the bigger commercial conferences, you actually already saved a lot of money just by joining.
Yes. All right. Well, I'm actually going to be attending the one in Berlin next week, so I'm really much looking forward to it. Yeah. And Kasper, thank you so much for sharing so much insight with us today.
Well, I'm just happy to be here, and I'll be happy to come another time and tell even more.
You'll be very welcome to do so.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.